Bazuba Quabo! Hello, Torage the Warrior here, and this is Rage Talk 4. If you didn't understand what that sort of pre-intro was, then you should head on over to converttoraid.com and check it out. Convert to Raid is a WoW podcast about World of Warcraft and the world of raiding. It's very fun to listen to, and they have a segment on it every now and then called the Scouting Report, where they find an expert from a class in raiding, and they sort of interview them, ask them some questions about how their class plays in a raid. And of course, for Fury Warrior, they asked yours truly, and I went on the show. So if you want to catch that, it is not this week's episode, but last week's episode. That would be the 25th of September. Now, there's a couple things we talked about on the show that I want to talk a little bit more about here on Rage Talk. And the first one is, they asked me one question I wasn't expecting them to ask, which was, how is Fury versus Arms as far as PvE rating? Now, I don't use Arms in PvE. I spec Arms for PvP, but I've never really rated extensively as Arms. And that's just because, I don't know, I like Fury. Even if Arms was better, and there has been times where it has been better on some fights, even the majority of fights, and I still just haven't gone Arms just because I would just much rather be Fury. It just that's what I play. Torage is Fury. There's no like numbers reason like, oh, you crunch the numbers and Fury comes out to be more damage. No, I just play Fury because I like Fury. Now, the answer I sort of gave them for that question is that Arms is a bit more burst AoE heavy, and which is a terrible description. And not that that's not true, but that's just not a very good description of the difference between the two specs. And I thought about it a lot because it is kind of a rough question, you know. I mean, there's obvious differences besides, well, one uses Bloodthirst and one uses Mortal Strike. But the other key differences are just the sort of the style that they play. Arms is more sort of pattern recognition and priority based, and Fury is more rage management based, and that's just what they lean towards. Now, you're still going to have rage management as a big part of Arms and any warrior spec, and still, you know, rotation and pattern recognition is still something you're going to want to know as Fury. Is what I mean by pattern recognition now is stuff like using Bloodthirst every other global cooldown. Now, there are times where technically you wouldn't want to do that. That would be times where, say, you just used a Slam or a Raging Blow, and then Colossus Smash comes off cooldown right then. You kind of want to use Colossus Smash and then go to Bloodthirst instead of Bloodthirst then Colossus Smash. Now, the reason why I personally don't do that is because, first off, it lines up the combo for the Colossus Smash a little bit better, and it may actually end up being more DPS. And another reason is just because it's the pattern, it's the rhythm. You get that sort of rhythm going, and it is what that allows you to do. It allows you to focus on other things in the fight and when do your rotation without necessarily paying, the most, zoning in on it. It's tunnel visioning your rotation. So you can get that pattern going, that bloodthirst something, bloodthirst something, bloodthirst something. You recognize the patterns that it kind of goes in. Now, there's even more of that for Arms than there is for Fury. I don't know the ins and outs of the PvE ones, which is why I eventually just said, I really don't know Arms that well as far as PvE goes. But Fury is mostly, the biggest part of Fury is managing rage. Another thing we talked about real quick on the show was about the Swifty video that came out where he stacks all mastery and is able to get 100,000 crits on target dummies and even on some players. Very, very specific situations in order to get a 365k crit. That is a Raging Blow main hand, which is impressive by any standards, even in the specific situation that he set up for it. You can go watch that video. It's pretty cool. But I did test it out for myself, and I was able to get a 100k crit on a target dummy. Here's some footage of that, and maybe some footage of me blowing someone up in PvP with it. I didn't really extensively do a lot of PvP like this, just because he just said get as much mastery as possible, and most of that ended up being PvE gear, because I do have a lot of heroic raid gear. I have 2 heroic weapons that have mastery on them. And just other raid gear with lots of mastery. So I was able to actually stack more mastery than him and more strength. But he is an expert PvPer and I am not. So yeah, and I also didn't have a group of people behind me. So, but it was definitely fun. Now this wouldn't be a Torage video if I didn't learn you something about Fury. Yes, learn you something about Fury. And the kind of point I want to drive in today is something I kind of haven't. I've mentioned it in a lot of my videos, but I haven't really driven home the necessity of it. And that is the art of double potting and just using Golem blood potions to begin with. A lot of people, they are expensive, and a lot of people are like, oh, consumables, maybe if I'm pushing for like the meters, I'll use that. But they don't really consider like how much help that they do give you in the raid, especially when your entire raid is doing it. And the damage is substantial. It's a lot more than you would think. Now I don't have to tell you that 1200 strength is a lot, but a lot of people think that, well, it's a consumable and it only lasts 25 seconds. But let's sort of think about it like this. So a quick example of the benefit you get out of double potting is sort of something we usually use to, or a theory crafting method we usually use to figure out what is a better trinket. So, but it can be applied here to potions. So say you have your double potting, so you're using a potion just before the fight starts, and then another one later on, usually in the execute phase, or if there's some other type of burn phase. Then, that's 1200 strength for a total of 50 seconds. So if we multiply 1200 times 50, that's 60,000. Then we take the total number of seconds in a fight. Say it's a 7-minute fight, which is fairly standard. So that's 420 seconds. We take that 60,000 and divide it by 420. Then we get the number that is the average amount of strength you get per the duration of the fight. So that ends up being about approximately 143 strength. That's a lot. That's more than half a flask and almost 4 red gems, which are things, of course, you would never consider raiding without, so why would you ever consider raiding without double potioning? And that of course, is just a really basic example. It ends up being even more beneficial than that, because of course you're using it when you have all of your other cooldowns going. So if you use that with the multiplier from probably Death Wish, getting more crits because you probably have recklessness going, and maybe raid buffs going on at times. They use it during bloodlust, so it ends up being even more than that. That's just base. That's just if you were sitting there meleeing the entire time, that's how much bonus you would get from it. Also, of course, keep in mind that that's based off of a 7-minute fight. It's going to be less average strength over a longer fight and more average strength over a shorter fight. Alright, so the very last thing I wanted to talk about in this Rage Talk video is Blizzcon. I will be at Blizzcon live and in person. I'll probably just be wandering around, but if you really do want to catch me, then be at they have the realm meeting tables there. So they have a time for people of a certain battle group to meet up, and they have tables set out for your realm, so you can go there and you can meet all the people at the convention from your realm. So be at the Cyclone battle group realm meeting and find the Feather Moon table, and I will be there. Thanks for watching this Rage Talk. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe, like, and favorite this video.